Morning, everyone. Kent, hey, see you there. How's it going?
Morning, all. Real quick, first off, not sure why my name's on this. Art has been the one who has been driving rules from the very beginning. I was the smart one that got him involved and said, yes, please, would you like to do this? The rules took effect on August the 8th. I think one of the questions that we're hoping to hear from, if there are rules that others have found to be an issue that need to be addressed, we would like to hear it. This is a living document. It's not a static document, although we don't want to make it too living that could impact folks operations. So we do want to make sure that if you have questions, you have issues, those are things that throughout this presentation or in the question period tomorrow that we hear from you so that we can address them. Thanks. And with that, I will turn it over to the person who has done all the real hard work on this, and that's Art.
Thanks, Kent. You are a little bit too kind. Yes, I mean, I did a bunch of work. I was the editor, but to be clear, we had a core group of the strategic planning working group, maybe a dozen folks or so, who put a lot of time into this. So it was a very proper program-oriented effort, had a lot of help. I think the rules updates were a success, but that's partly what we're here to talk about. I have slides. There's slides many of you may have seen before, most of them. So I'm going to do the highlights at the very least, just to get things rolling today. And as in previous CVE rules discussions like this, please ask questions of the rules. I have seen 2 or 3 things come up in the CNA Slack. I usually try to chime in if I feel the question hasn't been answered yet. If it's rules related, there are, as we actually practice the rules and operate by them, I'm sure we're going to find future things we'd like to discuss or change or have interpretation questions. So again, please ask questions. This is a workshop, and what we primarily want to address are actual questions about the rules. How does this work? What is this telling me to do? I'm having trouble interpreting something. I saw something happen that I don't think was, correct. Those sorts of questions. Give me a moment here to find my going to check and see if I can watch chat at the same time. I think I can. Excellent.
We will watch it if you like, Art, and we can jump in and ping you.
No, yeah, please do ping me. I did find the right set of windows and monitors, so I think I do. I think I can see the chat here. Yeah, very briefly, this is me before and after, working on the CVE CNA rules. Actually, at least we had a couple of long meetings to get things finished. If anyone's not able to reach me, here's a couple of ways, 3 ways, in fact, to do so. I am a CVE board member. I work at a small U.S. government contractor called Intelligence Labs. And just so it's full disclosure right up front, I do support CISA. So if I say good things about CISA, you know that they're true. We're going to hit the biggest changes. And sorry, while I drive slides. A lot of the fundamental shift was, I think, really to clarify, but to be really careful about writing this idea about the right of first refusal. So this is very much in a nutshell. If a CNA exists with appropriate scope, the CNA with the most appropriate scope, and that is essentially code for you're the supplier, vendor, developer of the software in question. Guess what? You have the most appropriate scope. You get first dibs, or the first opportunity to choose to assign or to not assign. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. We debated a lot the idea about cloud service assignment or not cloud service assignment. Much of this hinged on discussions around, well, what do I do for a cloud vulnerability? I don't have to patch it usually because my service provider patches it, and then I just refresh my browser and I'm good, which is mostly true. But we ended up deciding not to make special rules for handling choices for cloud. And a nice thing about that choice is it sort of applies to all sorts of new technology. We're going to get into some AI, ML related topics today. Not to jump too far ahead. Yes, it is entirely possible that an AI vulnerability could get a CVE ID. We appreciate CVE programs 25 years old. Guess what? Technology has changed in that time. Attitudes have changed in that time. Concepts of what is reasonably acceptably secure or not have changed in that time. We expect that change to continue, and we are open to adapting as needed for the CVE program. Also, another maybe the third biggest challenge, well, number 3 on my list here, is that we really tried to clarify, and it's a maybe slightly artificial construct, but step 1 is the thing I'm dealing with a vulnerability by some definition. We sort of have to define this, otherwise CVEs don't mean anything. So it has to be for a vulnerability. And if the answer to that is yes, then what are some of the rules on assignment? How many vulnerabilities? How many CVE IDs? And we clearly acknowledge what has already been the case, less formally for a while. We expect CNAs acting in good faith with different knowledge, different priorities, big messy world full of vulnerabilities, unfortunately, to use their judgment. And that is perfectly okay. The system is designed for that. There might be a dispute. There might be a disagreement. There might be an assignment collision. An assignment might be missed. But on the whole, CNAs exercising their judgment and trying to get IDs assigned for publicly disclosed vulnerabilities is our mission. So we do federate and delegate guidance, authority, and responsibility. Right of first refusal comes from real estate, among other civil court areas, and civil court sorts of discussions and cases. This is basically if something's about to happen, for instance, an assignment is going to be decided, one party, the CNA with most appropriate scope, usually the supplier, CNA gets the first chance to act. And again, this has been more or less practiced for quite some time, but it's now more enshrined in actual words. I don't know if Lisa Olson is on. In previous editions of this talk, I phoned Lisa for help on this item, but I'd be totally surprising her today. So I'm gonna talk through this. But Lisa, if you are on.
Here.
Hello.
I am here.
Hello.
However, Art, I'd appreciate you can talk through it because I'm going to talk about this again tomorrow. So
awesome. All right.
There's 2 different takes on it.
Got it. I will do my version of it. Then you can ignore, please, Lisa's name on the slide, and she'll give you her opinion tomorrow. Excuse me. So some of this is a little more detailed, actual quotes from the rules about the more significant changes. 4224, right, must not consider technology type as the only basis for assignment. It can be considered, but just because it is technology X is not enough information to decide yes, assign, or do not assign. There'd have to be a vulnerability, of course, and some other factors involved. So again, if cloud, then X is not in the rules anywhere. If AI, then Y is not in the rules anywhere. If traditional on-prem software bought in a box at a store with a DVD ROM in it, then X those aren't not the way the rules work. The last resort rule comes with other resorts. So, the last resort is, there are other resorts to the first refusal rule, right? So if the first most appropriate scoped CNA declines to assign for almost whatever reason, then other CNAs with appropriate scope can assign. Typically, we want this to be a CNA LR, a CNA of last resort. Specifically, if the vulnerability is public, a CNA LR should be involved or at least coordinated with to avoid sort of a collision or a duplicate assignment. We have a should rule, though, and if it is a vulnerability, so 4221, that first bullet, if the CNA has reasonable evidence to support the vulnerability determination, the vulnerability is publicly disclosed or is expected to be, and you've got appropriate scope, then that is sort of the core guidance for a CNA should assign. That should is there because we do explicitly expect CNAs to use judgment. And at the time we felt that must was actually too binding there. Additional help for when should someone publish, right? So this is a little bit, CVE has always been, a MITRE person. A while back, Dave Mann, I believe, introduced me to the idea of a boundary identifier or a boundary condition, right? And CVE is, right, the boundary between often a vulnerability known to a few people, possibly under private coordination, or if things are going badly, maybe only known to the people who are exploiting it. And then it becomes publicly known. I realize we don't cover all of them, but at that point, we want a CVE ID to mark the boundary between a small amount of knowledge to sort of public knowledge. CVE over the years has and might still from time to time handle non-public vulnerability information. Somebody asks for an assignment, they have to sort of explain that it's a valid vulnerability. But the program has mostly steered away from sort of the private aspects of coordinated disclosure. Other parties do that. CVE program does not accept the minimum amount necessary to assign CVE IDs. So we are very cautious about sort of crossing into the we don't do CVD and we don't tell you how to do CVD line. Nonetheless, 4222 gets into a little bit of advice saying CNAs should publicly disclose. This is a little bit of recommending that a CNA should publish something if the vulnerability could cause significant harm or requires action or a risk assessment by parties other than the CNA. This is a little bit of what came out of the cloud assignment discussions. And one example I'll provide is, my cloud provider and my web application that exists as a website on the internet, a single place I go log into as far as I can tell. As a user, there was some vulnerability. They fixed it on the back end. It was distributed across the planet in minutes or hours, completely fixed. I have no patch to apply. I have no update to apply. There are still reasons I might want to know that a CVE was assigned, a vulnerability happened, it was fixed quickly. Maybe I had some suspicious activity last week. Maybe there is a little bit of guidance. Maybe you want to refresh your browser, log out, log back in. Maybe I'm tracking other information, and it would be very helpful to know that indeed there was a web service involved in some incident activity. There was a vulnerability being exploited. So there are reasons other than I need to patch to have a CVE ID assignment. Sorry, I'm going to check the chat for a minute. I may have started to answer this, and I'll try to come up with another one. One of the questions from Chad is, could I elaborate and give examples of what other considerations might be used in order to assign CVEs to cloud-based systems? So yes, again, there was no argument from the rules folks, the drafting committee, so to speak, that yea, verily, indeed, it was not very common to have users patch a cloud system. The provider does that for you. But again, one example would be maybe an extreme example, right? I'm investigating an incident. I'm trying to figure out some stuff that happened. I don't have a lot of on-prem software these days. I subscribe to a number of services. That's how I operate my organization. Something weird happened. Maybe there were some accounts taken over. I'm not exactly sure yet. Gee, I wonder if anything's been going on with my cloud service providers. Oh, hey, here's a handful of CVEs that were patched recently or addressed recently by my transparent and responsible cloud providers who are informing me of bugs that got fixed, which is great. Maybe that's something I need to investigate, and I have a clue as to what might have been going on. That's one example. And not quite an example, but another argument that led us to this result is we discussed what is a cloud system and what is a not cloud system. Guess what? Gets hard to define in the middle. Right? Is the mobile app part of the whole thing, or is the mobile app separate? Mobile app does nothing by itself. It's just a web browser wrapped up in a wrapper a lot of the time. What about the device, the mobile app, and the backend cloud system? Where are these lines? What about things that are offered as an on-prem? I run it on my laptop, a FAT Microsoft Word client, or Microsoft Word in the cloud. Which one of those is affected or not? Are they both affected sometimes? They are sometimes. So if you can imagine that trying to solve the is it a cloud system or not definition, and for every other type of technology that might come down the road in the future, for example, is it an AI system or not? We decided that conversation wasn't going to be very fruitful and to sidestep it entirely. So George, program itself. Oh, PURL. We're going to talk about this later. So we are going to talk about, this is not in the CNA rules at all. There's at least one, if not a couple more times this meeting, we're going to talk about.
We have a topic at 12:45 on that. I put in the chat.
There you go.
Thanks, George.
Roger that. Yeah, unsupported is a good question. Not going to cover that right now. The rules not in the assignment rules. Yeah, roger that. Thanks, Alec. Sorry, there's an official questions area somewhere? The Q&A.
Hey, that's right, Art. This is
Thanks,
Dave.
Yes.
Everyone,
Yes.
please feel free to use the Q&A function to type your questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Any chance I can see that while hold on. I'm using the internet. Got it. I can see the Q&A in case anybody wants to type in there. Yeah, this is a Zoom webinar proper, folks. There is a Q&A. We'll parse the chat as well, but it's a slightly more formal messaging or question system. So yes, what Dave and Tom said, please. This is possibly a funny story, but not terribly exciting for the, what the rules mean, but this took a while. Kent usually reminds me it started before, even earlier than this in some cases, but it took a while. And again, very solid team effort. We had a lot of meeting time spent on this. SPWG did most of this. We edited. We had lots of comment periods. We ended up using Google Docs because it worked well just for shared multi-editor control and tracking and all that stuff. We have, having an editor was a good trick. Good thing. I think somehow I volunteered. I guess Kent probably made me think it was my idea, but something happened. Oh yeah, this is important. I should maybe have mentioned in the highlights. The previous rules, the 3.0 rules, had a little bit of, I wouldn't call it conflation, but it covered both a little bit more operational governance sorts of topics. Those have been pulled out to a separate document. The current rules are really all about assignments and CNA processes. So how to act properly as a CNA, how to do your assignments. Is it a vulnerability? really focused on that. Who is your root? What are your administrative duties and governance duties are a bit pulled out of there. At the time I wrote this, the word proposed is in there. Maybe it still should be in there, but the rules document and a handful of other, forget the term we decided, the board decided that a handful of documents should go under, we're trying out just GitHub as, you know, it turns out GitHub's good at revision control. So markdown files in the GitHub repository, which I'll show in a moment. And the rules document is in there. We expect to use that to capture future change requests and discussions and resolutions. So fully transparent. I think I put a issue in there already, something came up in a conversation. I wanted to capture it and I can already not remember what it was, which is good that I wrote it down as an issue. So GitHub issues, changes well tracked, cut a release, all the good stuff you get from software for markdown text files we plan to use. I don't believe there is no set time period, but during the arduous rules process, we thought to ourselves that it would be nice to have smaller change sets in the future, possibly more frequently as needed. So this is the schedule here is not set, but we're hoping that smaller amounts of change, possibly more frequent if needed. This might be just sort of a reminder that says, right, at least once a year, go read this and see if you need to change anything. Yes, continued program review, public review, much more transparent on GitHub, and actually cut a release. I'll show that repo in just a moment. So I'm going to check the Q&A. I saw something come in. Oh, one is already answered, so I will. Sorry, Dave might still be typing. So I'm looking back at the 4513 CNAs should publish a record within 24 hours of publicly disclosing a CVE assigned by the CNA. Yes, that's a Dave's right on the money. I'm going to expand just a tiny bit, though. There's an interesting sort of subtle part of what public means. So 4513 is specifically about a CNA who assigns an ID and the CNA publishes something, right? A very common case, non-generic, less generic cases, right? I'm a supplier CNA, I have a vulnerability, I fix it, I release new software or a patch or an update, I publish an advisory, which is a public disclosure, or I publish fixed software on the internet, which is also a public disclosure in CVE terms. I now have given myself a 24-hour should timer to publish the CVE. Folks may be familiar with the term reserved but public. We do not like reserved but public. This means somebody has published a CVE ID out there. People can find it. Of course, they go look up the CVE ID and they get a little message telling them it's been reserved, but there's no information here. Super frustrating. Please publish your CVE IDs right with your other public information as quickly as possible. Public disclosure, and this is a good side topic. In the act of updating the rules, we updated the CVE program glossary. We added and updated a few definitions. One of them is to define what publicly disclosed means. This means that publishing, for example, the software fix, right, a new version, a patch on the internet where anyone can get it is definitely public disclosure. That's public disclosure even without an accompanying knowledge base article, advisory, release notes, whatever your documentation method might be. The reason for defining it this way is that it's pretty well known that people out there have the capability of reverse engineering the patch or diffing the binary diffing the software figuring out the vulnerability and then taking action on their new knowledge. So the CVE program and the rules do not do not have a rule or a judgment saying that quote unquote silent patching is good or bad, or if someone chooses to release fixed software and delay the advisory release, a few days, that is, we don't decide or tell you that is a good risk decision or a bad risk decision. But we do declare for our purposes that published fixed software means the vulnerability is public, and that you should now publish your CVE ID in short order, because somebody does know what happened. So if the CNA, Stefano, if the CNA assigns an ID in their own software and makes an update available, yes, you have to publish. Sorry, the advisory, I think we recommend that you publish an advisory, but it's not required. We're not your company or your PCERT. We are the CVE program. What we do require is that the CVE ID be published. And we encourage that to happen very, very quickly. Again, the rules don't enforce that you do or do not publish the software first, distribute it privately to customers. I don't want to get into the debate about what encrypted means, but that is certainly your choice. And again, we don't make a risk determination decision for you that is better or worse or safer or less safe for your customers. Just that if it's published software, published vulnerability information, get the CVE ID published quickly, please. Hey, Cassie, do you see? Well, the answer so I don't know that this brings challenges. There is plenty of room for a CNA, a supplier CNA, for example, to publish, in some sense, distribute fixed software, which an adversary could reverse engineer and figure out what the vulnerabilities are in some period of time, days, possibly hours. We don't tell you you may or may not do that. There's plenty of should and room to continue that practice as you see fit. That's not our job to tell you how to operate your PCERT or your disclosure program. The thing we try to focus on is when the information goes public, get the CVE ID populated. And public does mean, in our terms, that you publish the fixed software. I think it's 24 hours. There are some parts of the rules where if that time leaks on too long, that if necessary, other CNAs can step in, a CNALR or your root through the governance side of things can get involved and sort of maybe force your hand a bit to publish or publish on your behalf. That would be a fairly extreme situation, but it could happen. And let me tie that back to the right of first refusal. Any CNA is welcome to refuse for almost any reason. End of life could be one of the reasons. We don't support this. We're not going to fix it. It's only a medium severity. It's a low severity. The CVE program sort of doesn't care, but if you chose not to assign, and it is a publicly disclosed vulnerability, the program is going to assign. Probably a CNALR, possibly a researcher CNA, a coordinator CNA, another supplier CNA who's affected can assign if the first CNA chose not to. So that's the sort of carrot stick balance. Supplier CNA gets first dibs, but supplier CNA is not allowed to control publication by choosing not to publish for a valid public vulnerability. I'm going to click answered on those unless anybody would like to. Yeah, thank you. Or someone else is awesome. Take a look at the clock. Bunch of musts. This is a fun game to play. Must, should, and may, and a number of hours were spent debating must and should for sure. Nobody argued about may too much. We got actual comments in. Yes, glossary updated. We've had a couple updates to the definitions since then. We also found that a number of the CVE program documents contain their own local mini glossaries or terms and definition sections, which, as you can imagine, resulted in multiple definitions for the same terms in some cases. So we're cleaning that up as we go. We are actively discussing what dispute policy means, and may have to reorganize that document a little bit. And EOL got some updates recently as well. I saw something come in. So, question on 533 CVE record must have at least one public reference. The short Dave is typing, but the answer to that is that you are correct, I believe, in your interpretation. We do not, those of us who are not customers or folks that support contracts surely do get frustrated trying to figure out information about a vulnerability when we can't get to the information, but are told that there is some. The CVE program does not strictly tell you may not do that or you must not do that. But there must be a public reference to to back up the CVE claim, and that reference from the CNA must not be behind a login. So I think it's entirely possible to have something that's public and more information is behind a support login. That's a pretty common trick, and that's valid. What's strictly not allowed, it would be, hey, I'm a supplier CNA. I published a CVE ID. The public reference is for login.support.example.com/CVE ID. Nobody can see anything. You have to believe what I said in the CVE record. There's no backup public reference. That is what we're trying to work against and not allow. So yeah. Yep. What Todd has said in chat is also correct. Can't really prevent an assignment. It can be disputed. Is one way to handle things. There's the revisions and the discussions around revising the dispute policy are going to get into this. I would let folks know to expect revisions to the dispute policy coming up in the near future. One of the fun parts of our trying to bring some levity to our long rules discussion and combine it with actual rules. We had a local term, the noble exception, that involved where the line is between sort of a physical attack against a software system of some kind. Purely physical attacks, right? Hammering my laptop to pieces or stealing it, physically stealing it alone is not a CVE, right? Everything will succumb to physics at some point, electricity or physical force or fire or heat or something, right? But there is a bit of a carve out for, hey, my laptop I just mentioned, somebody stole my laptop, but it has features like secure boot and disk encryption. My phone, after, 5 or 10 failed login attempts, will have a delay, or it will lock itself, or maybe even wipe itself if it's well configured. And I'm a very concerned, paranoid person. If the system has features to protect against physical attack, and those features are not working, that it's a CVE ID. So that's where the sort of physical question came in. And yes, Janet Jackson is coming up next. And there's Katie, who's going to enforce. I'm not sure she would do this these days, but she has volunteered to be part of the CVE court, should we need one for rules and assignment disputes. She'll mess you up. We're going to send her out to get you. I have Janet Jackson in here. Hang on a second. Let me jump ahead if I can figure out how to. Here we are. Yes, this got assigned. Somebody said that, hey, if you physical attack, right? Sound pressure, bass frequencies, if you blast a Janet Jackson song with sufficient amps and big enough subwoofers, you could cause hard drive damage, I think was the vulnerability. And I actually forget the status of this. It might still be out there. I thought I disputed it. I thought someone disputed it. Anyway, under the new rules, this is not a vulnerability and therefore not a CVE ID. Oh, I think the answer is we did not retroactively apply the rules. We thought about this in about 10 minutes. We decided what a problem that would be and what to do every time we rev the rules. So the rules do not apply retroactively. Somebody could still dispute this, but you can't say the new rules now say X as the pure basis for your disputing. Yes, Janet Jackson. Yeah, actually, we put it in the rules. Good for us. Funny how these good ideas pop up. Hey, who wrote that? There is not actually a super secret society, but there was a decision that there'd be some text around a council of roots to adjudicate things at the sort of the top level. Basically, it's roots and TL roots. If they need to get together and make a decision, again, the CVE program, there is the board who has pretty much close to ultimate authority, but we are very sincere. The program is very serious about delegation. So Council of Roots is a piece of that delegation. I'm going to change my view here and try to, there we go. Jump around a minute. Make sure I didn't miss anything actually super important. If you're confused about assigned versus reserve, it's actually hang on here. There is no official state in the CVE system called assigned. We have reserved, published, and rejected. Assignment is sort of an undefined state. It's very similar to reserve. The idea here is that the CNA who reserved the CVE ID could have them sitting in their desk drawer in reserved state, but actually might have 10 vulnerabilities coming up for a disclosure and have 10 CVEs reserved and by the CNA's definition, assigned to those vulnerabilities. So when they go out, that's which vulnerability gets which CVE ID. So in case assigned and reserved are confusing, reserved is an official state in the system. Assigned is a bit less than that. I'm going to talk about tags just for a moment, and then I'm going to pause. We're close to time. There are some tags, and I mention these because they do. These three are pretty important. We had a discussion on there, no separate handling for cloud. However, we do have a tag which a CNA can use to identify something that is exclusively hosted. So if everything in the CVE only exists, the fully hosted service, you can tag it with this. And then downstream readers of CVE can identify, air quotes, cloud only vulnerabilities. This tag only works if it's purely only cloud service. The Microsoft Word exists as an on-prem and a cloud application. Makes it not apply here. Would that make this tag not apply? Unsupported when assigned is code for end of life, end of support, right? The assigning CNA, probably the supplier CNA, isn't going to fix this. It's just too old. They've declared they're not supporting this older version. That's fine. It's still a vulnerability in public. It still gets a CVE ID. A CVE ID is tied to the vulnerability, not the fix for the vulnerability. So a fix is not required to have a CVE go out. Also, I would encourage folks, there are times when vulnerabilities are talked about in public and there's not a CVE ID. People start looking for one, and then there isn't one, and then a week goes by and people are talking about that thing on the internet that I saw yesterday or last week. It's very helpful to have the CVE IDs early in the public disclosure, even if it's unplanned and uncoordinated and there's no fix yet. So it's perfectly valid to have a CVE ID out, published without a fix, and that a fix is forthcoming. It's also fine to never have a fix, possibly because it is unsupported software when the ID was assigned. Disputed is also very important. Disputed gets marked a couple of different ways, but there is a tag to know that a valid, sincere dispute has been filed and accepted. Tidbit on disputed, there is no necessary, a disputed CVE can sit there indefinitely. It could end up being rejected. It could possibly become undisputed, or disputed tag could be removed. But disputed does not necessarily resolve to any state. It can sit disputed indefinitely. Okay, looks like I'm right at time. Any further questions? I'll be around pretty much both days. I watch Slack. If I see a rules issue come up, I usually jump in. And if it's an outstanding rules issue, we can't just resolve with a chat conversation. I will do my best to get it into an issue in GitHub so it does get resolved at some point in the future.
All right,
Here's
have time. We booked you through 11, so you got plenty of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw 10:50. Oh, I'm sorry. 10:10 to 11. Anyway, I'm still going to pause for. I'll keep talking a little bit, but this is your official notice to ask rules questions if you have any.
Rapid fire, lightning round.
Yeah. Bam. This is the CVE documents repo where I bet we have a README in here somewhere, which I can explain. Yeah, these are the CVE policy documents the board decided get tracked and handled carefully and require board approval for changes. Other documents don't rise to this level, but these documents do. Glossaries in here, lots of good stuff. Oh, 2 issues, excellent. Both by me. Ooh, all right.
We have a troll from notorious troll Todd Beardsley.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
I will read it out for him if that's all right.
Please.
How often do adversaries turn early CVEs, that is pre-patch, into weaponized exploits? The usual complaint about publishing early is that the vendor doesn't want to enable attackers.
Yeah. So I will say that two hat answer. Hat one, which is my CVE board and CNA rules hat, is the CVE rules don't really assert anything other than what we said earlier. Publicly disclosed includes that you put fixed software on the internet. And yeah, it's a troll question, but it's a very valid question, and it's a constant debate, and it gets to be a subjective risk decision a lot of the time, and that's what it is. That's okay. Individually, I would agree that giving adversaries access to stuff like a full advisory and full notice to the entire internet, yeah, that helps adversaries a little bit. But the important thing in my mind is the net benefit to defenders is far, far greater. Enough adversaries out there have the skills and capabilities to binary diff your patches and reverse engineer your software. And if it's interesting software, they're not starting from zero. They have all your software and all your versions on hand. They reversed it last time you patched. It's a relatively small technical lift to diff most of the time for them. So in a case like that, your customers have the software. You just have the software. They can try to start playing the patch race game, but they don't have the knowledge that the adversaries are going to get for themselves. So there's an argument that the net benefit to defenders is much higher by just publishing the information in the first place. And Todd, right on to your question, I don't know the exact answer. It happens a non-trivial amount of time, purely anecdotally. Stumble across this all the time. Todd worked at Rapid7 for many years, and you maybe saw this even more often than I did, particularly in the Metasploit parts of Rapid7. So don't don't blindly think that just because the binary software patch is out there and no other information is out there, no CVE, no advisory, that's not magic. There are plenty of people capable of figuring out your vulnerability and potentially exploiting it. And the time frame is days. It might be hours in some cases. Thanks for that question, Todd. It's a good one. Yeah, just to prove the example, look, here are a couple of changes pending. No changes proposed yet, just no pull request, just an issue set for this guidance about the year portion of the ID came up in Slack. A lot of CVE knowledge, more than I was hoping, sort of was campfire stories taught, read down by generations over experience around a campfire, assigning vulnerabilities. So writing this down in the rules is a good idea. This is a trivial one. These are both probably trivial changes, but just to prove that there are issues. Official doc is, of course, here, which I'll leave this on the screen since this is a rules conversation. Any other rules questions? Yeah, Mike, folks can read Mike's chat, but let's see. So Mike's question is a little more specific. Have we seen threat actors and researchers looking for not yet public CVEs that leaked? I don't even have a good anecdotal opinion on that one. This actually gets to an open question. It's an open issue elsewhere in a CVE GitHub repo. Right? If I do some guessing and some spamming of the CVE API and URLs, I can figure out I can find some IDs that have been reserved. And that would indicate that, surprise, somebody has a vulnerability. They're going to assign a CVE ID to it. The knowledge of who assigned it, the CNA, is not part of that information that's returned by that URL, just that there's an ID in a reserved state. So I don't find that very useful. I find it actually very annoying. I'd rather that we said nothing and gave no reserved knowledge, or just said who the assigning CNA is. And both of those, it's an ongoing debate, and there are pros and cons to both. However, I don't consider it a surprise that, yea, verily, software has vulnerabilities, and I'm happy when they're getting fixed and a CVE is reserved. So I don't know the answer, Mike. I have nothing really direct on that. I mean, I would argue that researchers and adversaries are sort of always looking for vulnerabilities. I don't know for sure that knowing there's a reserved ID out there somewhere is helpful. Sorry, you did say reserved. Oh no, not yet. CVE that leaked. I don't know. It might draw some attention, but I don't have a good opinion on that one. Something I would be confident in. And Chris, for exclusively hosted service of your statement. My understanding, Chris, is that, yeah, I'll go back to the definition there. If a vulnerability affected the online version only of Microsoft Word, only, I believe exclusively hosted service by definition would apply. If the vulnerability, right? Okay.
Yeah, that was what I assumed, but I wanted to throw it out there because I almost got from what you had said that if it was Word and it had both a hosted and on-prem version, that we would use this tag.
Yeah, so it's a little. Sorry, it's a little tricky. There's a problem, not a problem. There's a logical construct here of, is the tag applies to the CVE record. So that's the combination of the vulnerability and the affected stuff. Todd's, Word is clearly offered as both cloud and on-prem. So I would not give Microsoft Word the set of things includes both the on-prem and the hosted service, I would not give that this tag. But if the CVE, the vulnerability only affects the hosted version, I think this by definition would apply.
Yeah, and that would be my understanding too.
Okay. I'm just making sure I got Todd's point here. Yeah, if the vulnerability clearly affected both, this tag would not apply.
Yeah, that's the way we're doing it too.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, hey, guess what? Microsoft can tell us exactly what they're doing exactly. Stop making things up. Thank you as usual for allowing us to use an actual name of software as an example. I pick on Microsoft and Oracle a lot because they tolerate it and are prominent CNAs, very active in the program, and very helpful to have them both here. And their names I can remember quickly, so that's all.
We are in
yes,
our
please.
last minute. I don't
All
see
right.
any other comments. Pete doesn't mind being called out either, apparently.
Great. I will try to pick on Red Hat more.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you,
we go. We can start doing that. Is there
Thanks,
any
Jeff.
last minute question for Art before we transition? We have 1 minute. All right. Well, we can certainly keep the phones open. You can use the Q&A, and Art himself might even answer it in the Q&A for you as we move to our next topic.
Great. Thanks, everyone.